Hey, good afternoon. It is 8 o'clock on a Monday night, and we are officially 3 years deep. This is Dialogue with Dozell. So glad you're here with us tonight. Um, we have this marks 3 years of the dialogue, and tonight we're going to celebrate Juneteenth, but we're not going to stop with the celebration of Juneteenth. We're also going to ask the question: what is the state of Black America? What is the current state of Black America in view of tonight's celebration of Juneteenth? Janis is going to join the show tonight. I'm waiting on her in just a second. In the meantime, just going to kind of give a look ahead, and we're gonna get ready. She's going to give an overview of Juneteenth, and we're just going to ask this question and look and see and kind of say to ourselves, okay, we got this holiday. We're celebrating that we're free. But that we're free, how far are we? Jan and I kind of go back and forth. She's a big proponent of reprobations. I think that politically it's maybe not the thing right now, but she has an opinion on that. And but one thing I do know is that we're not. We're no longer in chains, enslaved, but we're still living in ghettos. We're still the highest incarcerated. We still have the highest mortality rates. And I'm not complaining. I'm just wanting to state the fact that so that we don't get too carried away in this celebration and think we have arrived. 1967 or 64, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, U.S. Senator from the state of U.S. Senator from New York, did a study on the state of Black Americans, and it revealed back then just how poor we were, just how undereducated we were. Of course, we were still in the throes of Jim Crow laws back then, but it painted a bleak picture for us. I was looking at a news clip of President Johnson, who was president from November 22nd, 1963 until 1960. Let's see, he won re-election, so 1968. He stepped aside. He decided not to run, primarily because of the Vietnam War. And President Johnson was asked to speak in 64 at the graduation of Howard University. And he said, and what precipitated that, in fact, Michael Smerconish on CNN played that clip, and it was an answer to the situation with the affirmative action coming back up for, I guess it has to be renewed like the Voters' Rights Act. Well, we see how your Uncle Clarence and them in the Supreme Court busted up the Voting Rights Act, and how all these southern states have tried to make it difficult for a very resilient people. You can't overcome our resilience. If we overcame slavery by the grace of God, we'll overcome any and everything else you throw at us. But he said, how can just because we're no longer enslaved, the playing field is far from being leveled. That was a point that he made. And so because of that, we have affirmative action. And that was one of the things that he was talking about. We have to do more things like that to even the playing field. So now the affirmative action, I guess, is up for renewal. And I was looking at one young lady, one young Caucasian sister, who says that it's not fair. She did make the same concern that the Bakke case made back in the 70s back in the 70s to end affirmative action in California to attempt to, and they have had very radical things that have occurred because of his decision that tried to end affirmative action totally. And what it ended up doing was make it where now it's always brought under the microscope. So my concern, and I'm gonna get on with the topic in just a second. I hope everybody's having a great Juneteenth. Shout outs to our producers for the excellent poster that they provided. We just want you to celebrate Juneteenth, but while you're celebrating, we don't want anybody to lose knowledge of the fact that we're still not free. Yeah, I mean, we're having to live in ghettos and those kinds of things. We're still not free. So we're getting on with it in just a second. We're headed there. I didn't want to jump the script because we have an order to it, and I wanted first. Jan is going to prepare. You saw that Jan, our dear cousin Jan, is tonight's co-host, and she's going to talk about. She has a presentation for us about Juneteenth, and then we're going to look at some of these other facts. And I kind of want to keep it in that order, if that's possible. So we're waiting now for her. I hope this has been a great day for you. It's like the Martin Luther King Celebration Day. That's not a day where you just celebrate that you're off from work, but it should be a day in the honor and in the spirit of Dr. King. It should be a day that we're actually doing something, a day that we're doing a service that we need to do. Tonight, and there has been a lot of there's been a lot of people over the last few days, and I'm not going to do the show about a brother's untimely death by the police in one of our local cities about a month ago now. A person that we knew, and he died very tragically. But we're going to tie that show in when boy, wasn't Dr. Osgood awesome last week. We didn't deal with her as Senator Osgood. We dealt with her as Dr. Osgood. She was some kind of awesome. So she has agreed to come back with us. And on that night, we're going to talk about the gun laws, and we're going to talk about the situation which recently occurred here in Broward County. And I'm going to, oh boy, I don't know where that came from. And we're also going to talk about, we're going to deal with the situation that recently occurred here in Broward County. And we're going to deal with this nationally known, and we're going to deal with. We're just going to glance by. I'm not, because of the persons involved, I'm not going to deal, but we're just going to scan and talk about what actually occurred and just not spend a lot of time. So that was the first of the sets of losses that we've had. Of course, we dedicated a show a few weeks ago to my dear aunt, one of my mother's last two remaining siblings, and the remaining sibling is in very seriously ill, and we're asking your prayers for her. Her name is Mary Carter, and for our family, and then to have learned about Dr. Randolph Bracey, a stalwart theologian, preacher, who started the New Covenant Baptist Church over in Orlando, and he since retired, and he was in the process of establishing the Bethune-Cookman University School of Religion, and where you could actually get a Master's of Divinity. You don't have to go to Atlanta, or as we did to Louisville, or to wherever, to Virginia Union now to obtain that degree. And so because of that, with Dr. Bracey, we lost Dr. Bracey yesterday, Dr. Randolph Bracey, and we're going to talk about him in the upcoming weeks. But tonight we want to dedicate tonight's. Well, let me welcome on my co-host, Jan. How you doing, sis?
Hi, good evening.
Untimely, my bad. Good evening. How you doing? We're going to dedicate. Okay, good. You're looking great.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're able to do that. Some people like me think go get your creation and they can help me look as good as they can get it. It's a hard task for them. We want to dedicate tonight's show before we get into the celebration and get into the state of Black America, the current state of Black America. We want to do a short dedication. We want to dedicate tonight's show to Reverend Dr. Rosby Glover. Dr. Rosby Glover. Rosby is just a few years older than I am. And we served together at the Mount Bethel Church here in Fort Lauderdale, where his brother is a senior pastor. He is like a giant here in South Florida because of the work that he has done in ministry beyond the four walls of the Mount Bethel Church. And Rosby and I served together for a season. We live not too far apart. And for the last 2 years, he has been pastoring the First Baptist Church in Frankfort, Kentucky. His lovely wife, Kim Glover, is from Kentucky, and they were called to pastor the First Baptist Church there in Frankfort, Kentucky. And Rosby left us on last Tuesday, very unexpectedly, very tragically, and we love and miss him. Those services for him will begin on next week. Next week, he's going to be funeralized in the church that he ministers to there in Frankfurt, and then uh, there will be a service here at the Mount Bethel Church on Saturday, July the 1st, and he will be uh, interred at cemetery in Fort in West Palm Beach, where he was living prior to accepting the ministry. One of the legacies of Rosby, just a very cool cat. He could sing because all the Glovers could sing. He was a singer, just an effervescent personality, a super nice guy. And our children were about the same age, so there was a closeness. And he ran Mount Bethel Human Services for years before accepting the pastoral role up there at First Baptist. And for a while, Mount Bethel Human Services was the second largest employers of African Americans here in Broward County, and I think that is an awesome statistic. And a lot of young men and women not too far beyond their bachelor's degrees were hired there, and they had a nationally known program that was highly studied across the nation called the TAC program, Teen Alliance with Clergy. That Dr. Glover and Roswell would later run, even as the grants were running out after 911 and so forth. Some of the grants were, but they found ways to be creative and ingenuitive. Were ingenuitive in keeping that program on a lesser form alive. And what it did was it was a juvenile diversion program that kept our juvenile boys and girls from going into the system on their first offense. And I got an opportunity to work with Chris Mitchell and to kind of see some of the things that they did firsthand. And Rosby would become the executive director over at Mount Bethel Human Services before pursuing the goal of his further calling. That was a pastor of the First Baptist Church there in Frankfort, Kentucky. So Rosby, man, we miss you. We're going to see you in the morning. I play golf with his brother, who is just a year or two older, Ronnie Glover, a tremendous preacher and talent in itself, great singer, anointed brothers, and of course, one of my mentors and Pastor Dr. C.E. Glover. Our heart goes out to Miss Kim and all of their four children, and the good people there at the First Baptist Church in Frankfurt. We love you, man. We'll see you in the morning. Amen. All right. Jan, was just talking about it's been a tough season here. We've lost a lot of close friends and acquaintances over the last few months. But let's talk about Juneteenth. Let's smile and let's bring this up. So it's in your hands.
Well, I first want to say thank you for inviting me and to share this with you. I want to start by saying I actually find the federal codification of this event in time to be actually offensive and quite heinous in the manner in which it was passed without really much grassroots request, and how the United States is so incredibly hypocritical in its desire to placate Black people who are typically voting Democrat by providing this federal holiday without a discussion or acknowledgement for how to repair the many generations of people, Black people in this country, whose ancestors, great great grandparents, who were enslaved 2.5 years longer than after the 1863, January 1863 proclamation, which was the Emancipation Proclamation by President Lincoln, that enslaved people were effectively free. And you know how I stand on reparations. And so I find it actually rather offensive that this could be an acknowledgement that the United States continued to approve of the enslavement of Black people, yet will not provide any type of repair for all the generational harms that existed and continues to exist. So I just want to start with that because, as I said in a note to you, I still find that Black Americans, descended of chattel slaves, are not free in this country. Anytime we have to continue to ask, request, demand, legislate voting rights for Black people, or to stop suppressing the ability to vote in this country, we're not free. We are free-ish, and that's a travesty. As you know, the founding of this country did not include Black people who were here. It actually didn't even include white women. It only included white male landowners. And we're really still at that phase. So, Juneteenth, while I was aware of it in my younger days, although it was never in any course, curriculum, or book, my kindergarten through 12th grade, or higher education, undergraduate work, I actually find it offensive. I think that there should certainly be an acknowledgement and a commemoration of our freedom, or shall I say, those people who were in Texas who were still enslaved for 2.5 years longer, that this federal government allowed. And even if those people were able to see some sort of notification, such as a sign posted to a merchant store, or something that was posted to a tree, they wouldn't have been able to read it. Why? Because there were laws, anti-literacy laws, that stated Black people, it was illegal for us to learn how to read. So we wouldn't have even been able to read any type of notification. So I just want to start there on Juneteenth.
Well, before you sign on, I kind of gave a pre-qualification by saying um, after, because we actually changed tonight's show. We had a guest that had to do some changing the schedule to next week, I believe, because of some Juneteenth activities that guest has. And so, excuse me, I think um, after you and I originally talked about the show, I said, well, let's be realistic about it. What you just said about us still not being free, I have some statistics, and I think you saw the segments. We're going to kind of attack some of the inadequacies and inequalities that still exist, so that we don't get the misconception that we have made it and that we are free, and that we don't buy into the right wing Uncle Tom's rhetoric that I made it, or the other guy from South Carolina, I don't even want to call his name, I made it. Whoopee, I'm in America, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps, you can too. When we reveal some of these statistics tonight, it's going to show us just where we are. And it's a slap in the face reminder. Yes, we're not in change, but economically, educationally, and housing wise and otherwise, we still have a long ways to go. We have not overcome. So go ahead, Jan, I'm gonna get out your way.
Oh, well, no, I mean, that's my position on it. As I said, never learned about Juneteenth as a youth, or in any structured educational entity, school, or college. But in terms of what is the state of Black America today, we're free-ish. There's still overt movements to suppress voting rights for Black people throughout the country that are being legislated as we speak now. And I'd have to look back at the segment notes that you put in terms of housing. Black Americans are still behind.
Let me ask you this, because I'm sorry, I don't want to jump the segments, because I think housing is a little further. Let me ask you this. Do you think that Juneteenth should not be celebrated?
It's the narrative, the phrasing. Celebration. What is there to celebrate? That our ancestors, Black ancestors who were chattel slaves in this country. I mean, let's just go back to the transatlantic slave trade. I'm traumatized to even think about how Black people were kidnapped from their home countries, stripped of all of their cultural significance, their names, their religion, and just think about the travel. over here on boats, packed into boats like sardines, chained to each other, not provided any way to relieve their bladders, let alone relieve their bowels. So that means they were urinating and defecating on each other in a boat, chained together. So let's just talk about how we got here. And that's never really dealt with. And that's traumatic for me. And I would think any other Black person who knows that their ancestors came to this country like that. We didn't immigrate here. Black people didn't immigrate. I'm talking about Black people who are descendant of chattel slaves. So the history of just that, and then move forward 200 years to the Emancipation Proclamation, and then 2.5 years later after that, where enslaved people in Texas were still in bondage, and then the 100 years of other slave-ish laws that were in place, Jim Crow, convict leasing, all of that. I mean, to ask why are we celebrating Juneteenth, or the word celebration, I don't think should have any framework in that, in what Juneteenth is. Juneteenth is a solemn reminder that Black Americans, descended of chattel slaves, were still held in bondage in this country, and then freed, or sort of freed. The word celebrate has no room, in my view, in the narrative.
So we know that Vice President Kamala Harris was instrumental, at least publicly, the narrative would state that she was instrumental in propagating to the president that that's something that needs to be done because of what is a political favor, if nothing else. So would you say that it should not be acknowledged? Would you say that it should not be acknowledged? Because I was expecting today that we'd have some more in-depth facts, but I think this is a substantive discussion. You think it should not even be acknowledged as a law, or how do you feel? Because millions of dollars have gone forth whenever there's a federal holiday. That means the bank systems are closed, the postal service, all federal, and I guess as it goes on, because it took 20 plus years before all 50 states began to celebrate the King holiday. So it has a significant impact economically and otherwise. So should African Americans, should there be a date that we just press on and not even acknowledge? Is that what your position would be?
Let's not get it twisted. I said celebrate. I take offense to the word celebration.
Okay.
Acknowledge
So
acknowledge that it happened, which is the totality of enslavement to me. And when you speak of Vice President Kamala Harris, that she was instrumental in getting this law passed, that's even more offensive to me. You're talking to someone right now who actually worked on the Martin Luther King holiday legislation when I worked for Congressman John Conyers. It took 15 years to even acknowledge the great sacrifice that this man and his family put forth, which was his death. I mean, he died for us, for Black people, to gain some parity in this country. So that was a 15-year fight just to acknowledge Congressman John Conyers. June of 1983, I remember very vividly sitting in committee with Congressman Conyers when the legislation was passed out of the committee, then went to the House floor, which was voted and approved, and then to the Senate, and then passed into law by President Ronald Reagan. That was 1983, and the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday was first acknowledged or celebrated in 1986. And if you remember, through the years, the narrative of that day moved from celebrating to acknowledging, and then to a day of service, right, where it's not just a day off to right, go and partake in the sales of appliances and technology and clothing.
Right.
It is a day to remember how Dr. King served, and for us others to serve our communities in a similar fashion, however we can. So it is not that I do not want people to acknowledge Juneteenth. It's that I want to know, why is it that this country, this vice president, this president cannot establish a reparations commission by executive order, because the request HR 40 has languished in Congress for 34 years with no passage, no nothing. Why can't this president and vice president establish that commission? A lot of other commissions have been established by executive order so that we can pull together the research that exists about why and how descendants of chattel slaves can be repaired.
Let,
And whatever form that takes, monetary, education, housing credits,
so
elimination of taxes on Black people, whatever that is, they won't even establish a commission to develop that report.
let me ask,
So
let, so
I,
let
I
me,
don't I don't see how you can have one without the
let
other.
me so let me I mean, and I don't want and I know I mentioned everything that you just stated. I kind of said before you signed on. Alphabet, I mean, Bernard, I'm hearing everything you're saying too, and I'm with you. You know, we're like in a state of slavery, political, economic, and educational slavery down here with Governor Despicable in office, that we pray gets nowhere near Pennsylvania Avenue. But I don't want to turn tonight into a discussion of reparations. But
But I have to respectfully say, because we as Black people, descended of chattel slaves in this country, don't really want to talk about it, we are where we are now,
yeah,
without any type of recompense or repair or real acknowledgement of the horrors and the heinous trafficking of our ancestors.
So
So I can't have a conversation of one without the other.
well, so my thing is, I'm not ignoring it. I know that's I know you're on a commission up there, and I know that's something that you put a lot of investment and time and passion in. And I'm not going to say I totally disagree with it. I just don't want to make that the subject of tonight's show, and see if we can try to look at some of these other things, which when it all boils down, they're all, and see, other people don't understand this. When I say other
and
people,
why is it that other people, and please, do you mean other people meaning white Americans?
White America does not understand.
Why is it they don't understand?
So the statistics that we're going to roll out tonight, when we talk about the disparities in housing and crime and sentencing, and all of that, I mentioned, you came back and hit on the voter suppression. And Bernard, voter suppression, as you know, is not just here. It's just double here because this clown is running for president. But it's in all of the southern states, and it's almost like a cancer that's spreading across the nation from state house to state house. But what I want to just kind of stay focused in, and Bernard, you're absolutely right. It's systemic racism, and people don't understand it. They don't accept that. They see a Clarence Thomas, they see a Tim Scott, or they see a Larry Eld out there in California, as crazy as he is, and they think, okay, so they made it. And I say, and I think I'm not saying it by myself, no, you guys have turned your backs on reality. Yeah, anybody can be propped up and made an example. And at the end of the day, the same people who push you up, they're laughing at you. Clarence Thomas, he should be, by all rights, he should be investigated right now. He should be investigated.
Absolutely. Department of Justice should be investigating him and his ethics violations is really what it amounts to.
And then once you start, actually, you can go through the court. And it started with what was the big conservative that died out on the resort where he was being by some billionaire was hosting him. Who's the guy that's died? The recent male that died on the court.
I'm not sure.
I can't think of his name, but he's very distinctive. I don't want to hear. Please don't, Tim Scott. President Obama, I give you credit for how you responded to him, the asinine statements that he made the other day. But the only reason, Jan, I'm not trying to make this, and I understand the ramifications, and the systematic symptoms are still, they carry on, and people don't understand it. But that's reality. If
But
you
they
don't,
don't, they choose not to.
well,
There
yeah,
is
if
no
you don't,
way that anyone who has gone through the American educational system, and I'm going to say specifically public schools that have standardized curriculums, would not know, even with the very minimal amount of education that is provided about Black Americans' experience. It is the denial, because for a white American to actually embrace what happened to Black people, and that their privilege in this society of moving through society freely, and the wealth that their families, and yes, there are white Americans who are in poverty, but the mere fact that they can put on a suit and clean themselves up, they will be accepted over a Black person who has gone through Harvard University.
so
That's the fact.
my
So
my question is, before we go to break, and we've blown the segments right out the water, but that's fine. My question to you, and please answer this in 30 seconds or less. Do you think that the reason, no, let me frame it like this. Do you think that this time in 2025, if the administration survives November 2024, that you would see that commission that you're asking for, that would be more of a reality from President Biden?
I don't know. I can't foresee the future. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, but I'm dealing with right now,
But you
2023.
understand.
Why not do it now
But you
and
understand.
have a year or 18 months to do that? Why? Because they don't want to expend any political capital, and that's offensive to me. That's very offensive.
That's a quick, and I don't know if we want to take this show to have that discussion, but sometimes you have to look at timing and realism.
Dozell, I cannot allow you to say
For
that.
sure.
Once again, 34 years ago, I helped to write HR 40.
Janis.
Okay, 34 years ago. So we've gone through several, if you want to say, Democratic administrations that should have been in support of Black people and didn't. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, beware the liberal Democrat. And yet Black Americans have, since the 1960s, been voting religiously that party. And so it's constantly, let's wait. We introduced that legislation on November 20th, 1989. Bush was in office. Then we go through Clinton, Democrat, nothing.
Obama was the last.
We've gone through Democrats who've done nothing. So
Obama was the
second
last.
verse, same as the first.
So I mean, in all fairness, I mean everything.
There's nothing fair about it, and I have to be unapologetic about this.
You gotta look at both.
This type of discussion is the problem.
Not
standing up and demanding is the problem.
Politically expedient. After 2012, after he was reelected, and you know that Barack Obama. The reason why they have he got out of the White House unscathed, without any scandals or anything. Do you not know what that would have done to his legacy?
I don't care. I worked in his administration, and I don't care. It means not standing up for Black people. When is someone going to stand up for us?
Well, let's go to break, and we'll come back and go on the other side of this, and we'll continue discussing the state of Black Americans. On this Juneteenth, what is the current state of Black Americans? You're getting a sense of it right here on the dialogue. That's it. GoGigaWorld.com. GoGigaWorld.com. All of your virtual needs, they got you covered. They've been doing the dialogue for 2 years. Listen, the other night on my Facebook, on my Facebook page, I got a memory, and it was a memory of one of our first dialogue with Dozell in 2020 right after we kicked it off, put a camera on Facebook Live, and Toya Glenn, who is one of the partners at GoGigaWorld.com, say, Dad, we got to pull you out of here and make this show look professional. And they have made this show as professional as they can make it look with my face involved. They've done a good job with it. Listen, there is nothing virtual that they can't do. The pandemic is over. We're back in the world. But Zoom and virtuality and streaming, all of this stuff is here to stay. Web billing, it was before the pandemic. GoGigaWorld.com. Let them make you look good and let them advertise your business. Okay, so tonight, I hate to do it on this night, but we're gonna have to do this. Tonight is a dang dog. It's been a minute. And tonight's subject in the crosshairs of Dane Dog is none other than our brother, one of the most talented brothers in all of America, Ja Morant's. Ja Morant's, Dane Dog. Man, it is horrific that you are suspended for 25 games in October when the basketball season, the NBA season starts back up. 25 games. Now, you want to ask me, according to his salary, what 25 games equals? 25 games equals $7.7 million. He's suspended for 25 games at the beginning of the season. Ja Morant, we just had you in the crosshairs several months ago. Right before the playoffs started, we had you in Dane Dog again, because there you were. And you were suspended because you were riding around. Well, you were in a Nevada, you were in a Colorado gentleman's club, as they call it, waving a gun and caught live on IG. How crazy can you be? Dang, dog. And then here we go again. You came back, you made the sad song in front of the commissioner. You persuaded him that you learned your lesson. You supposedly came to Florida, probably some resort, and you're dealing with the bigger problem, and somebody taught you, or somebody your publicist put out a great statement. Some of your the products that you push were put on hold during that process. Well, we know that was all a thing by the NBA just to slap you on the wrist to try to get your attention. You met with Commissioner Silver. You told him you learned your lesson. You came back to the end of the year, but the minute you guys were eliminated from the playoffs, dang, dog, there you are riding around with a brother. You said it's a toy gun. I don't care what it is. Man, if my career was in the balance, I wouldn't be anywhere near a gun. Which brings another question. Why are you fooling around playing with guns? What's your affinity with guns? You're the most talented brother almost in the NBA. You're the new Michael Jordan. You're the face of the league. Why are you blowing all of that? You, what 50 Cent called a winkster. Dang, dog. Or really, let's get to the seriousness of the matter. The other night, Kendrick Perkins and Jay Williams were on First Take. And on First Take, Big Perk made the suggestion that you need to be traded to Miami so that you could get caught up in this heat culture and be mentored by people like Udonis Haslam, who would keep you in line. Pat Riley and all of that culture would filter down to you and make a difference with you. And somebody say, why Miami? Molly said, why Miami? That's one of the worst places in the world, places outside of Vegas for you because of the nightlife. But dang, dog, Perk dropped a bombshell. He said, listen, he says he's in too deep. Remember the words of those three words? Remember Tupac Shakur's movie, In Too Deep? What did it deal with? It dealt with banging. Can you imagine somebody with an iota of your talent banging? Even the Crips, and you shot a Crip sign in one of those videos. Dang, dog, the leader of the Crips said you owe them now. And so you're in too deep. You as talented as you are, you got money everywhere. You are set to be a billionaire by the time you get to be 26 or 27, not from the league. That'll be chump change. It's the money you're going to get from endorsements, and you're fooling around with that foolishness. Dang, dog. You're going to fool around. It's not going to be dang dog. Next time it's going to be, are you serious? In fact, about it, Commissioner Silver should have suspended you for a half a year, up to a year. But I felt the 25 games, and they said it was therapeutic for you to be able to come to the facility and practice and be in the locker room and be with your teammates so that you are not left out there for the dark world, and that you are where you can get some positivity around your life. I know this has been long, but dang dog, I'm hoping that somebody gets this to you. Somebody gets through to you. I hope this $7-point-something million and the endorsements that you're going to lose will make a difference for you so that we won't have to bring you back up again, but we'll be talking about you being the MVP in the NBA Finals. Dang, dog, don't come this way again. All right, we're back on it. And I really don't want to talk about that on tonight when we're talking about this we're talking about June 10th. Let me throw this out. Educationally, and I heard what you were saying before we broke, Jan, about us not being married to a particular political party, and I think this may have been because of the influence of our friend Omarosa that President Trump donated. I didn't say donated. He supplied HBCUs with the biggest amount of money. Is $250 million. And not only did he supply them with them as a one-time deal, which they would have to come to Washington every year and beg just to try to survive, but he made it a permanent thing that every year that amount, and it'll be on an escalating scale, will go up every year. Well, let me just tell you something about educationally. HBCUs graduated more Black doctors, more Black lawyers, more Black chemists, and more Black college professors than Harvard or any other major, particularly liberal-leaning institution in America. And in America today, these statistics are like a year or so old, but non-Hispanic Blacks, only 24% of them have bachelor's degrees, whereas 38.3% of non-Hispanic whites have this. Now, I know just what you're saying, Jan, it is residual. Bernard said it, it's systematic. And so we know that the inadequacies exist. The median household income, this is almost like staggering. Non-Hispanic whites, the average household income, this was right post-COVID, $78,000. Our house come, non-Hispanic Black house comes $48,000. I want to pause right there. There's some other staggering statistics, but I want to pause right there just to indicate that we don't think that we've arrived. I don't want us to think that. I don't want us to look at some of these politicos or U.S. senators or Supreme Court people or whoever they are and think that we have arrived, because we can't. We haven't. These statistics bear it out. And we're taught communally, we don't make it until our community makes it. In other words, we grab another on our way. I have a philosophy when I'm at a red light, and I don't want traffic cops to get in trouble and nothing like that. But I want to get through that light and make sure at least one car behind me gets through it. Okay? There's a light by my house that sometimes people are texting or whatever, and you got to blow. This is South Florida. This is brutal. But they'll be doing that. And I want to get through there at least fast enough that the car, at least one car behind me. That's the idea that we're supposed to have. There's no reason for there to be that big of a disparity between our households. Jan, tell us, what can we do to overcome? What can we do ourselves to dig ourselves out? I'm not talking about any government help right now. That would be great. That would be nice. That's something we all want to see happen one day. But right now, where we are right now, just like HBCUs were formed to help us when there were no such things as us going to mainstream institutions, what can we do right now in our own communities to dig ourselves out of some of these staggering statistics?
Well, There are those who will say that I'm difficult or contentious because I don't go along to get along. And I always seek to articulate the truth and my truth. One of the things is stop worrying about other people and how they behave, such as the 3 to 5 minutes that you gave proselytizing about the young man and the way that he chooses to carry himself in the sport, which is his career. That's one individual, and he's made it to the heights of the NBA. What does that have to do with the masses?
But
I,
no, I
I'm
meant
just
to
saying.
you. I
I'm
meant
just
to you.
saying.
I just retired from teaching elementary ed. I was a PE coach. I taught elementary ed grades. I coach high school. I've been coaching high school football for 18 years. I'm in the throes of this. I got boys. I had a young man just got out of juvenile facility. He has a scholarship to a top 4 university. He's a sophomore. No, he's a junior. He's going to his junior year. Okay, he just got out. Now, I don't want to make his situation, but John Morantz has a massive influence over our community. He doesn't get a pass. He can't get a pass from that. It's not. I'm not trying to punish him, proselytize him. I'm trying to say, bro, turn around. It's not just about you and your little entourage. There are people who follow you. That's why Nike and other companies have signed you, because of your influence. And when they see you carrying a gun, guess what my young kids are doing?
Well, I wouldn't rest all of that on his shoulders. The United States is an incredibly violent place. It was founded off of violence. Again, Black people have been racially terrorized by violence. And so, the gun laws in this country are virtually non existent. Anytime that children can be murdered in the way that our children throughout this country have been, and we not buckle down, double down on the ease in which you can get guns in our communities. Unlike other countries that have experienced gun violence, they have swiftly changed their gun access laws, and some have actually put into place the requirement that there be psychological testing and exams before people can get a gun. So, that one person and the way that he's behaving is just a microcosm of this country. We love our guns and we love violence. It's all through our media, it's all through our airwaves of music. And it's been like that because violence and gun violence, come on, when there were only 3 channels, broadcasting TV channels in the United States, what was the major programming? Westerns that were all about gun violence. So it
So
is what it is. It's the United States.
you're absolutely right about that. You're 100% right about our culture, the dominant culture that we exist, but we don't exist in a microcosm. So we're in this culture, and one thing we do have the ability to do is to self-check each other. I can't let him get a pass to do that, as I wouldn't let if I had a son that had that was $1 billion. If my son, or let me just take it out of the realm, any young person that God has given me influence over, $1 billion entity or less than that, just able to make it. Why would I stand by and let them kill themselves and tear down everything that people have opened doors, kicked in doors for them to be able to do? Why can't we give him some guidance? He's 23 years old. I guess I don't understand. It's like you're saying because America is violent. You don't have to remind me about the violence of America. We just, commemorated, 60 some years since Bobby Kennedy was killed. Was 2 months
Yes.
after Dr. King was killed. I was like Jackie Kennedy. If I was able to, I probably would have said, man, it's time to get out of this crazy place. She left America for a long time because of the violence there after having lost her own husband to violence. So I get it. I despise the violence. I hate it. We're going to be doing a show in a few weeks about the gun laws in Florida again. Miriam Oliphant, not Miriam, I'm sorry. State Senator Rosalind Osgood is going to be on, and we're going to do part 2 of that show. But I get it with the gun violence, but it does not give us the reason. And somebody makes the point, well, in Tennessee, he was completely free to do what he did. he can do that because of the gun laws that you just talked about. But what does that say to our young people who look up to him? We can't let him get a pass on that.
Well, I think it goes deeper than that. He is one person who's behaving the way that he chooses to behave. All of this goes back to our households, individual households, and how individual households and parenting, uh, those are the first role models that people see, children see, is their parents. And how did this young man get to the point of behaving this way? It's been a trajectory going forward. It's got to have happened somewhere in his upbringing to bring him to this point, to be careless, reckless, and uncaring about human life. So we have to go back to our households and parenting to really look at, why are we getting these behaviors? Why is it, I'm in Detroit, Michigan, why is it that there's so much gun violence in our community? I lived in Washington, D.C. for 30 years, murder in front of my house, murder on my corner, and I lived on Capitol Hill. Why so much violence? And it was black on black males shooting and killing other black males constantly. I've been threatened because you're speaking out, just like you're saying, speaking out. But you got to go back to, how are these people raised, and move forward from there. So you asked me, what can we do individually to raise ourselves up? Well, in my view, and for my life, and that's really all that I can truly speak on, is got to stop going along to get along. And if you're not getting what you need, and that does come back to politics, because that does, and government does have a real place in all of our lives. It governs our economy, our educational system. We have to speak up and speak out for what we don't like and what we're not getting. Just like the gun laws, we have to speak up to our individual members of Congress and state legislatures to say, we want this, and hold people accountable, which means either recalling them out of their political perch, or definitely not voting them back into office. So those are some of the things. Black people have pulled themselves up since we got to this country by our, quote, bootstraps. And there are those who have excelled in many ways. And then just the average everyday person is existing. But America has its knee on our neck constantly when we try to excel. So,
excuse me. So, we're talking the same language now. Okay, let me just hit a few more of these. The poverty level for non-Hispanic whites, 10%, non-Hispanic blacks, 20%. Life expectancy, non-Hispanic whites, 76.5%, non-Hispanic blacks, 71%. The homicide rate, when you talk about black on black crime, this is part of it. Non-Hispanic blacks, 126%, non-Hispanic whites, 6.1%. And I didn't get in, we only have 4 minutes left in the show, so I didn't get, I'm not going to bring up the statistic about the incarceration rate. But I think that mentoring, us giving what we have, I would like to think that when Florida lost their mind in their legislative session, the worst session in the history of this state a few months ago, we, as Faith in Florida, we did a demonstration on the Capitol where the legislatures walked to. It was the day before they voted on the gun laws. And part of the gun laws, the craziness that they just passed, was that they were going to allow open carry. So we can be like Texas. You know, you got these two clowns on a collision course, DeSantis and what's his name out there? They're on a collision course. See who can be the craziest, who can out Trump.
Let me just say this, because you are running out of time. What can Black Americans do to change our plight here?
I just want to hear
down to economics.
You talked about politics.
Well, let me just say,
our demonstration kept them from doing that. They didn't.
It comes down to economics, Dozell, and we've had this conversation several times on your show. Black people need to retreat back into our own communities and only patronize Black businesses.
And you know,
Only.
and you
We
know
need
I
to
don't
turn
agree
the
with
dial
that.
back to 1900, where there was mass segregation and we could not go freely and purchase whatever we wanted from whomever. Only when our dollars are retreat from this economy, billions of dollars that Black people pump into this economy every day, every minute, will the powers that be take note. And as
Do you
long
know
as you are, I've said it before, as long as you remain addicted to these various media platforms, designer clothes, whatever it is that you are patronizing that's not going directly into the pocket of a Black person, it's going, everything's going to remain the same
did you
because
hear
it
what
comes
Michael
down to
Jordan said?
economics.
You know what Michael Jordan said when they asked him why you not more when he was in the height of his career. They asked him why do you not speak out? That's the comparison between him and LeBron. LeBron and D Wade were real activists like Jim Brown and Al Jabbar and that group were. Uh, and Michael Jordan made this statement. He says because Republicans buy politics. I mean, by Nikes too. And Republicans was code word for right wing, redneck, white people. And he said they buy Nike too. And that's why he didn't speak out. So that's another conversation that we need to have. We need to have a conversation about assimilation or segregation. I mean, because what you're proposing, what you're purporting is spending that money in and I've heard all my life about how the Jewish dollar stays in its community so many times, spins around before it goes out, and our community is twice, if it's twice as great. Um, when we had this conversation, I was not you and I, but another personality the other day about his Sistrunk Avenue will never be the same. They're building it back up now, but now Sistrunk is not going to be all Black like it was when we couldn't go down to Las Olas or we couldn't go across to the beach. Your auntie tells a story of she was had gone when she moved to Florida and she had gone to Boiling Haven, was with a group of her white colleagues. She was in the back seat and they went to a particular place to eat and drove through, and the people told them they would never serve them as long as she was sitting in the car with them. So she had to eat on Ashley Street in Jacksonville, or we have to eat on Sistrunk, but now we don't. And so the options are greater. So I don't know if I believe that we should close back in and cut ourselves off from. So have the option to go to a HBCU, but have the option to go to a state university. That's something we're going to need to talk about.
Well, it is about circulating dollars in the Black community with Black owned businesses so that we can thrive. All of the statistics that you uh, rattled off, which are greatly wound up in a wonderful report that the National Urban League has published that talks about those indicators: health, education, housing, income, etc. I encourage people to go and take a look at the State of Black America 2022 that the Urban League published, and you'll see all of those statistics that you talked about. It's about taking care of ourselves and our community. And as I said, we need to really look at rolling back the way that we had to patronize only Black owned businesses 100 years ago because of segregation and Jim Crow and all of the racialized terrorism for us even putting foot into a white owned establishment. We need to go back there. Just look back 3 years ago to when George Floyd was murdered. And major corporations started talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and started creating all of these departments and hiring people to manage their diversity and inclusion and equity. And that's major corporations because they thought, wow, these Black people might retreat and retract their money out of their rage for this Black man having been murdered by state sanctioned officials, police officers. And that got them kind of scared and got them into mobilizing and supporting Black power, Black people. 3 years later, what's happening? That discussion has gone away,
So
and it's
we're
all
going to
about
start.
money.
We're going to pick this discussion up right here in 3 weeks. We're going to pick if we can if we our schedules coordinate. We'll pick this up in 3 weeks. We want to have a part 2 to this, and I'm glad that the show morphed into this because it has set the plate for interesting dialogue and discussion. And I appreciate it. Jan, give us a short as I see it. Just summarize the show. 30 seconds, please.
Well, again, thank you for inviting me. And I speak those truths to let people know that the state of Black America is very dire. Our rights are being impeded at every juncture. It's really not a safe place for Black people to be, once again, just like it was 100 years ago. So we have to rise up and do what we need to do for our community. And I think that is really about self-segregating our money so that it circulates in the Black community, because only then is the larger society going to take note and start respecting us and start respecting our money and investing back into our community. I hope that all Americans and those allies who are not Black will really look at how to repair the damage and harms to Black Americans, and that can only be done by reparations. That's how I see it.
Okay, I'm so grateful for that perspective. As I see it tonight, my eyes were open. Juneteenth, I somewhat agree with you, Jan, that it is not a total celebration. It has to be taken in perspective. We have to know that, yes, we're no longer enslaved and chained physically, but educationally, housing-wise, economically, psychologically, in many ways, we're still enslaved. And the way I see it, it's going to be up to us to change. That's why I took the time out to admonish a 23-year-old to say, hey, man, you're too young. Your life's not over. We will do better. You're going to be all right, but you got to affiliate with the right people and get the right people around you. That's how I see it. And I'm so glad that Jan, you joined us tonight, and we're coming back, and we're going to pick this up in 3 weeks because this is a very worthwhile discussion. Dialogue with Dozell next Monday night. And again, I'm so glad Jan has agreed to be with us more often. And we have Senator Osgood's going to come back, and we want to make sure that's the night that Kim can be here so we can look at these gun laws, because just what she's talking about, we have seen right before our eyes a couple of killings, just as we know those laws were intended to do. So next week, Pastor Rhonda Thomas, who is a revolutionary. She is the executive director of Faith in Florida, a 501(c) that does voter registration and those things. That is a conduit for democracy and fights for democracy, even in this state where it seems like a hopeless case. She's going to be here to tell her story and also to encourage all of us to do just what Jan is saying tonight, and to pick up and for us to be where we need to be. Jan, love you, girl.
You too. Thank you.
Dialogue with Dozell. We'll see you next Monday night, 8 p.m. Thank you for joining us tonight.